Ions are charged with negative and positive polarized energy, and these charges interact in a cosmic game according to universal law. Negative does not mean bad. That particular association does not apply within these concepts. It is best to refer to these generative energies as masculine and feminine. Gender comes from the Latin genere, which simply means to generate. In all creation, there exist these two complements, the masculine and the feminine, and it is when they unite that they generate something greater, they create. Everything has a sexual gender. Everything we call matter originates from sex. Everything forged in the cradle has pairs of seeds with divine potential. The Temple of Solomon is an interesting and mythical story. What is mentioned the most about it is that it was built by King Solomon and that he held the Ark of the Covenant. According to the most conventional sources, it was built approximately 800 years before Jesus Christ and was destroyed 400 years before Jesus Christ. To esoteric fanatics, it is a source of much debate and hatred. So without wanting to offend anyone, I shall focus more on the esoteric history and symbolism, that which can be applied within self. If we focus on the allegory, the message, the Temple of Solomon is pure conscience, and this conscience holds the ark, which would be knowledge. According to exoteric traditions, the ark held the tablets of the law, while esoterically it refers to the knowledge of the primordial beginning, which is the union of the two primordial forces, the power of generative sexual union from which all things are created. The arcanum then, under any interpretation, takes us back to knowledge. The Temple of Solomon was sheltered by the pillars of Jachin and Boaz. These are the Gnostic pillars. Gnosis means knowledge, also the Masonic pillars, but they also represent the two primordial principles. Boaz is feminine and Jachin is masculine. They are the symbols of disciplines paired with compassion. The Seal of Solomon is a very ancient symbol which many have come to know as the Jewish start of David. However, that correlation came much later, but it is not its origin. The symbol, like many others, was simply picked for its powerful connotation, but did not originate with David or the Jewish people. It is a symbol for all and more ancient than the people of Judea. If we take a close look at it, it has the triangle pointing downwards, which represents the chalice, and the triangle pointing upwards, or the spade, the alchemical symbols of fire and water. They are the masculine and feminine aspects of divinity. Alchemically speaking, water united with fire give birth to conscience. The star has too many exoteric allegories. However, we shall focus on esoteric knowledge and the pure meaning of this ancient symbol. The star, then, represents the unions of gametes, the balance between what is masculine and feminine. The Old Testament is a priori text full of blood, dominance, avarice, and misogyny. If we were not to grant it a more symbolic meaning, one would say the Old Testament is outright divisionist and demonic, by a God hungry for blood, vengeance, and vengeance. I would like to share with you two passages from Genesis, which we will inspect more as we go on. Genesis 1:27. God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he him, male and female created he them. This biblical passage has had many interpretations according to each particular sect of believers. However, if we go back to the original words, it uses the word Elohim, and not in the singular sense, for the Old Testament is a later adaptation of much older books. In the literal sense, Elohim means gods, not God, so the gods created man in the image of the gods. At the end, one can say there is so much to be debated regarding this passage, but let's not forget that it was written by three-dimensional hands. Genesis 1:28. And God said unto them, Be fruitful and multiply, and replenish the earth, and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds in the heaven, and over every living thing that moved upon earth. When looking at it from the Gnostic perspective and comparing it with more ancient writings, this mandate seems false and twisted to fit a particular set of beliefs. According to more literal translations of older texts, it has nothing to do with control, for dominion is more about slavery, antagonist terms of a poorly evolved consciousness. In more ancient texts, this refers to multiply as in multiply in virtues, values, and expand in knowledge. This conclusion I find more aligned with a loving pure divinity that is free. The word dominion was to be used in reference to the dominion of what is called the reptilian brain. In this way, when we look at what is being asked, it is to live in balance, away from either extreme meant to cage or subjugate pure consciousness. In other words, learn, think, experience, so no dogma, no rigidity, which is never a virtue, nor fall prey to self-abuse. What is being asked of us is balance, free yet sacred. A conformist society indoctrinates people and teaches them that it is a sin to disobey, not to multiply biologically. However, if we look at the teachings of the initiates of Qumran, the Dead Sea Scroll authors, one was not to multiply biologically while asleep consciously. That meant mentally immature and incapable of thinking for oneself. Their whole teachings were said to help people awaken to their true nature, away from rigidity and into true freedom. But freedom is scarce most, for freedom comes with self-responsibility. This, of course, made it easier for dogma to twist religions because it promotes absolving of self-responsibility through penitence or mental self-flagellation rather than spiritual growth, and it promotes the need for a savior rather than the strength to face oneself with one's light and darkness in order to alchemize this to illumination. In human beings, the creative energy of the primordial forces manifests primarily through the sexual union. Due to his neophyte status, which means he's new to his sexual power, most people do not have proper control without suppression of their sexuality. Sex is life, and within it one finds the mystery of life's hidden. We could say that sex is the guardian and maintainer of the divine spark within, but one needs to know how to utilize it. When the sexual power gives out, a spiritual death follows. We only need one sperm and one egg to generate a biological being conducive for the miracle of life, a pure divine being with all the power and potential to change the world. At the moment of ejaculation, man lets out anywhere from 200 to 500 million spermatozoids. So if one is all that is needed to help generate a new being, why so many? This, of course, has been debated intensely, and modern science can only say that it has to do with survival of the fittest. Gnostic teachings indicate that the solar energy is one of the most powerful, pure love that is emanated from the sun. It is in the waters of all vital existence where that energy is deposited to be assimilated. Within the animal kingdom as well as humans, it is in the seminal waters where we find this energy, in our sexual organs. The sexual solar energy would have an immeasurable generating and regenerating capacity. The Maituna, which means weave together or create together, is the action in which the transmutation of the seed takes place. It is a metaphysical as well as a physical rite. In its Latin etymology lies a great key. Immiscum membrum virile in vaginam feminae sine equationi seminis, which means insert the male member into the female vagina without ejaculation. Instead of regular coitus that leads to superficial orgasms, sweet caresses, loving phrases, and delicate touches should be lavished constantly, keeping the mind off the animal objective, bringing forth the human divinity capable of enjoying pure pleasure and deep ecstasy while sustaining the purest of spirituality, as if the action of my tuna were the most sacred, enjoyable, and liberating rite, because it is. The man should and need to introduce his penis in the vagina while doing this, so as to be engulfed by divine ecstasy that can last as long as both are willing to enjoy. Now the masters of ejaculation can easily adhere to the previously Latin phrase, for they know their body well enough to know how to enjoy, and yet without reducing pleasure they can pull their member out before the wet spasms that release semen take place, unless, of course, they consciously want to procreate. Learning to orgasm without ejaculation then becomes the magical key to rejuvenation, and this goes for men and women, for women also release sacred juices. Learning to own the body this way keeps us healthy, young, and the mind sharp due to its generative magnetism. In Tantra it is said one should ejaculate only when willing to procreate or for the purpose of healing the other, for the female secret juices hold within the power of regeneration as well as spiritual healing when it is paired with a pure essence. It is not an easy task, but definitely a subject for another time. The rising of the Kundalini is the awakening of the pure conscience. Alchemy, Gnosis, and pure Tantra say that the wasting of these sacred juices on empty encounters is the depletion of the body and serve only to the degenerate of the mind, from divine to reptilian. If the initiate is seeking to light the lamp of his consciousness, he needs to understand that he cannot achieve this through either rigidity or the waste of the sacred juices, for neither shows mastery over his body. For repression, like self-abuse, is not mastery, is simply imposition, which also degenerates the mind. Ancient Hyperborean knowledge also teaches the same. However, modern takes on its teaching confuse the original aspects and have gone to another extreme, where they say awakening of the Kundalini is bad. Those who don't understand the original teachings, like those who have twisted or misused what Tantra is supposed to be about, have demonized their knowledge. It is true that the awakening of the Kundalini can destroy you, and not knowing how to channel it properly can lead to degeneration of mind, body, and spirit. But this can be said for any energy, for pure energy knows not of good or bad, it only follows the path given by its creator. So of course these so-called modern tantrics or modern students of Hyperborean knowledge, who seem to have no respect for their sacred teachings, seek to purposely taint that knowledge, fueling the reptilian brain while putting to sleep the divine fire within. Like religious fanatics, which is what I call dogma, they may feel a fire within, but it is not one of liberation or illumination, but one of destruction and slavery. With its slavery in mind, dogma created the sentence of imposition of marriage, which divinity had no part of, for to say till death do us part, when life itself is ever-changing, everlasting, ever regenerating, is to impose a sentence not to ever change, or if one does and the other doesn't want to evolve, then it means to kill oneself mentally, physically, and spiritually for the sake of vows meant to cage rather than build. What to ancients was a rite of a beautiful promise meant to walk the same path together for as long as both were willing, became suddenly a jail. And that jail is very far from a representation of what the alchemical union is supposed to mean, which is based on the respecting of free will, for divinity itself is free. Love cannot be imposed. It has to be cultivated, born, developed. Nobody should try to enslave you, and neither should you seek to enslave someone else under any fancy name you may want to pick. For whenever there is a slavery, the divine does not live nor condone what takes place there. With that said, our current society seems to like extremes, and those who think are rebelling and live in the opposite spectrum seem to think that the solution to the confusion of what the alchemical union was supposed to mean is to simply give in to all animal urges without any care for their own mind or soul, without love, without rapport, without friendship, simply an empty masturbation that leads to half-ass orgasms and connections that die as quickly as they started. The alchemical union is a matter of soul, love, rapport, and choice, and it can happen at different times with different people, but always based on solid ground. It is the union of two conscious individuals who seek to not only enjoy, but to expand. Tao alchemy, or what is modernly called Tao yoga, teaches similar concepts as the one previously mentioned. They all seek to expand, to unite the primordial principles in hopes not to possess the other, but to liberate our own spirit so as to become whole on our own by using the original path of creation, which is sexuality, the most powerful and transfigurative power which has been deeply demonized because it holds a great key, the key to our own liberation. The orgasm is such a powerful energy that to suppress it causes many pathological illnesses with psychosomatic structure. That is to say, the illnesses of the body are caused by the mind, and the ones of the mind caused by the body. In sexual alchemy, one says that the potential and health of one's mind can be measured by one's sexual orgasmic potential. This powerful energy determines our health. This is why teachers and philosophers of the ancient world used to say that the masses are the ones with the most illnesses and psychopathologies, for they have been taught to either suppress or abuse, being wired for slavery and shame instead of liberation and the solidly grounded pride of being divine and free. Napoleon Hill said that the river can be repressed and its waters controlled for a time, but eventually it will force its way out. The same can be said for sexuality. This simple saying of his reveals some occult knowledge which has been passed down until it became just another saying to most who don't recognize the power of sexual transmutation. Human beings lose so much potential power by simply abusing themselves in one-night stands or superficial sexual encounters with no rapport or connection. The same thing happens to those who deny themselves the expansion and pleasure of sexuality, confusing the repression with being virtuous, when there is nothing virtuous about letting the divine spark within die and fueling the destructive rigid fire of ignorance and hatred. Rigidity is not virtuosity, for virtuosity actually means prudence, and prudence is knowledge, freedom, balance. Likewise, superficial encounters are not freedom, they are reptilian brain at its worst, empty, shallow, missing love and mental maturity. Neither path showcases a healthy ego or free divine sexuality. Instead, they represent the false ego originating in the beast within. For only a beast wants to dominate and own a person under the guise of holiness, and only a beast finds pleasure in its own destruction. Your sexuality then is not something you need to feel shame on or repress, but it needs to be used coming from the heart chakra in order to unify mind, heart, and body, and to experience an alchemical union. Alchemical unions are not immoral. What's immoral is anything that purposely hurts and minimizes another human being. Personally, I find the esoteric stand of Gurdjieff as the most mature about the subject and the closest to ancient sacred esoteric knowledge. He says that it is true that sexual abstinence is necessary for the awakening of the process of illumination, but only in certain cases and for certain people. For other people, sexual abstinence is not necessary, and for others, it will come like waves on its own, when initiate without thinking will not desire to engage in sexuality for a time. There is not one path and one rule for all, for we are all wired differently, and only the divine knows what channel it chooses in us. So for some, the process to start sexual alchemy and transmutation will need no sexual contact, but it will be born from free will, not saying one chooses the path of abstinence while secretly desiring to be sexual with another, for that is not coherent nor illuminated. It is even worse when one uses the excuse of blaming the devil for one's own personal choices. When a person does this, it showcases a person who is not ready to become an initiate, for he or she lacks self-responsibility. In other cases, the process of transmutation can start to take place with a normal sexual life, and to the surprise of many, the process can produce itself faster than with abstinence. Why? Because of self-responsibility, coherency, and balance, where sexuality comes from the heart as much as the body, unifying all the archetypes of self. The alchemical union, then, is the union of two consenting, free, loving adults. It is the union of the sun and the moon. Notice I said union, not sentence. You cannot force the sun or the moon to rise. Neither can you subjugate anyone whose divinity is alive, for they are free, and their choices are made in freedom and with consciousness, not out of desire to get some type of false moralistic medal, but freedom from the divine within. For as Gurdjieff said, there is nothing more immoral than to lack coherency, no matter how rigid or virtuous one acts. If the desires contradict that, then there is a lack of coherency. And there is nothing more moral than to rise to one's own freedom, acknowledging our light and dark within, as such living in coherency. The divine power is free, and as many of the sages said, it cannot relate to slaves, for like recognizes like. The alchemical union is the union of the mind and the heart. Once more, coherency. The mind and the heart aligned represent the hermaphrodite being, the person who is whole from the inside out, the union of wisdom and love. To culminate, I would like to share with you a beautiful reflection on the alchemical union written by Alejandro Jodorowsky. Everyone thinks of love in a relationship to a form of attachment between two people. There are many types and levels of love. We are so small in comparison to the cosmos that it is hard for us to comprehend this. To fully understand the immensity of love requires the expansion of the heart and mind and the will to face your own pain. Agape is the highest type of love, but this now has been corrupted to mean the love between a deity and his subjects. Agape is the love of divinity within and without. Very few people feel this love or understand it, because to know it, you got to break your heart. You got to have your mind be stripped of what it thinks is reality and sink it into the deepest pits of your own hell before you understand what this love means. It is a love not based on servitude, but on empty injustice, for love isn't for beggars, nor is it free of justice. Love and justice go hand in hand. Within romantic love, different levels exist, and they all play an important part in taking us from our base to transmutation or agape, all of it through conscious alchemy. First comes the love between two people that is instinctual, not even based on physical needs. It's two people who simply enjoy each other's company and personalities. Superficialities do not exist in this, only two people naked in a spirit. It is the missing of a person in its purest sense. You don't miss sex or them filling your everyday life because you haven't gotten there yet. You miss their essence. You crave it, you want it, because it feels good to be around them, because they see you and you see them. They see your light and your darkness, and they aren't afraid of it, and that is as intoxicating as it is invigorating. Then comes sexual love. It is a love based on pure desires of the heart, mind, and body. There is nothing sinful because a beautiful connection already exists. It is not seeking to mutually masturbate one another, but to satiate each other's craving through sexuality, but with love. Then comes emotional love, which if the second has been based on the first, then the third, emotional love, will deepen and expand. It is the love where we share our complexities instead of hiding them. We are like children, vulnerable, open, no agendas, simply us being ourselves without any type of superficialities. That person becomes our friend. Like a child, we trust them with our pain, our joys, our dreams, our fears. In return, they do the same. And like children, we are not seeking to use their wounds against them. Instead, in our innocence, we want to heal them. That's when intellectual, introspective love comes into place. This love is focused on expanding the magic found within emotional love. We are interested in giving as much magic to the other so they may be happy and heal. In return, they give us the same thing back. It is a beautiful exchange of energies, but it goes beyond this. It is knowing one also needs to expand, and that expansion is desire for the other person as well, not from a place of control, but of care. It is the love that demands one to grow mentally. Many fail at this type of love, usually because they make the mistake of wanting the other person to grow, but they don't seek to grow themselves, so they become sarcastic. But those who manage to make it through, their eyes open up to a different level. Then comes alchemical love, the one that seeks to unite mind, spirit, body, and soul. It seeks to unite and separate. Solve, coagula. It is the type of love that says, what I want most for you is to be you and to grow, to expand, to be happy, even if that means we part ways or we have to share our paths. As long as the path chosen leads to expansion, I know it is the right path for you, and in respecting that, I am inadvertently choosing the right path for myself as well. This type of love knows nothing of repression, is so complex and hard for anyone who doesn't understand what love really is. It is a love based on the purest of motivations. It is a type of love artists, poets, prophets, musicians have talked about for centuries. It is a love that loves regardless of the outcome. It is in chains but pure freedom, a freedom based on love. People think they understand this type of love, but they are blind. They are like little kids repeating a mathematical equation which could change the world, but they have no idea how it actually works. They talk about love and acceptance, but they don't understand them. Because to understand their actual meaning requires you to know pain, the type of pain that brings you to your knees. It requires that you submerge yourself in that pain and then rise without losing yourself. This means without becoming sarcastic, comatose in soul, rigid, or sanctimonious. To accept someone is not the same as not to care. I hear too many couples say, "I accept my partner," when in reality what they're trying to avoid saying at all costs is, "I feel I have failed, but I can't accept it," or "I don't care anymore, but I cannot let others see me fail." It has everything to do with a fragile sense of self and nothing to do with acceptance. Alchemical acceptance is recognizing and making the conscious choice to respect the essence of the other. This type of love doesn't enable, it is expansions balanced with reality. The one who knows this love don't turn a blind eye. They push you to face yourself and they welcome your feedback. They welcome you pushing them because it means you care for their well-being. But it is a type of well-being that has no shackles. They don't pretend to be accepting. They are accepting. They don't pretend to have a perfect relationship. To hell with such stupid concepts. They know to love means to hold and to let go, which leads to balance. That is why in astrology, esoteric knowledge, as well as in alchemy, it is represented by different symbols. In esoteric knowledge, it is represented by the lovers facing each other. It represents connection at every level. The second is the god and goddess facing away, but they're back to back. The simplest way to explain it is like this. I know I have to look at my own path, but while I do so, I got your back. What a beautiful thing. That is love, the balance between I am your lover, I need you by choice, but I am also my own self. No matter what, however, I'm always your friend and I got your back, even when we stop walking the same path. I don't think there is greater love than that, but very few couples experience this. Within those few, sometimes only one of them gets it, usually the one who has suffered the most. It is suffering, deep heart-wrenching, soul-scarring suffering that opens the heart. Your pain can be your executioner, or you can let it transform you. If you let your pain open you up, then you will know what love is.